Welcome to our week 4 panel on disaster planning and climate adaptation. So today we're joined by 4 STEM professionals, and we also every week we want to emphasize that the RePicture team wants to emphasize that this is not just engineers, but there are a plethora of different STEM professionals that work to help others through disaster planning and climate adaptation. So with that, let's go into our first question to the students in the chat. So we'll be hearing from STEM experts involved in disaster planning and climate adaptation. So what do you all think is the most important part of this? So please utilize the chat. Our first panelist is Dr. Chandana Mitra. She has attained a BA, MA, and PhD in geography, and she is an associate professor at Auburn University. Dr. Chandana Mitra is a physical geographer and a climatologist focused on researching the impacts of urban growth on local climate, especially in the area of heat and precipitation variability. Our second panelist is Dr. Michael Chenoweth. He is a climatologist and climate historian specializing in climate reconstruction from documentary materials for the construction of long-time series of various climate parameters. Chenoweth has published 21 articles and 1 book on a variety of historical climate topics, including volcanic effects on global temperature, early weather records, and data sources for use in climate reconstruction and tropical cyclones. Our third panelist is Bill Coulbourne. Mr. Coulbourne has a BS in civil engineering and a master's in structural engineering. He is a licensed professional engineer in 3 states, and he is also a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE, and a fellow of in the Structural Engineering Institute of ASCE. He also actively participates on the ASCE Engineering Standards Wind and Flood Committees for minimum design loads for buildings and other structures, as well as flood-resistant design and construction. In addition, he is a self-employed structural engineering consultant who focuses on how to improve the built environment in the face of natural disasters such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. Our final panelist is Jen Sorensen. Jen Sorensen attained a BS in civil engineering and an MS in environmental and water resources engineering. Jen Sorensen is the director of operations for a $240 million infrastructure business serving municipal and private sector clients. In this role at Atkins, she is focused on building collaboration across the company and improving business processes to optimize project delivery and financial performance. To learn more about our panelists, go to repicture.com/people and search their names. So I'm going to move into the questions. So our first question is going to be asked by, or most of our questions are going to be asked by the students, but our first question will be asked by Amanda Crocker. Amanda Crocker is a rising junior biology major at Lafayette College. And Amanda, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My question is, what is the most unique project that you've worked on? And if it was something sort of in your field or something you didn't expect to work on.
And let's start with Dr. Chenoweth.
Well, probably for me, the most unique thing I had an opportunity and pleasure to do was actually learn how the documentary process worked when we did the first documentary that I was in back in 2004, 2005. So I learned pretty much all of the ins and outs of what a film crew had to do to come in and actually put together the piece that we did on the volcano, Tambora, that erupted. And because they had already gone out, there was a volcanologist and myself. We were the 2 protagonists in there, and they told the story about us. And, you know, I'd never really expected anything like that. But, you know, when the email popped in my account one day and said, you know, we're with this film company, we want to do this story. And so it was an enjoyable experience on that part. It's it's very very interesting to see people collaborate in that effort to try to bring a show that they had their own preconceived notions of what they wanted to present, but they tried to be as accurate as they could. And so I had an opportunity. They came here to Maryland to film. They took me to Europe to film. They went with the volcanologist to Indonesia to film the volcano's caldera. And there are a lot of drudgery in that work of doing it and planning it. But I was just sort of along for the ride and got to see how the filmmaker did it. We talked with the director a lot, and so it was a nice surprise to have that opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Chandana, would you like to go
Sure.
next?
Mine one won't be as exciting as visiting a volcano like Mike's, but the one which I got excited about, that was a few years back, 3-4 years back, was a project which I did with the World Meteorological Organization, or abbreviation is WMO. And the reason I think it was very rewarding and unique is because it was around 10 to 12 urban climate scientists and experts coming in from all over the world, from more or less all the big cities. And I was representing US. So we were looking at cities like New York, Hong Kong, Beijing, London, Dallas, and Hamburg in Germany. And what we're trying to do is, it's kind of on the lines of what we're discussing today is, if the cities are prepared and how resilient they are to all these extreme weather events and, all, climate change, natural disasters, what they already have, and are the different offices and groups they're working together? Is there some integration? And then find the gaps and then make the suggestions. So it was so much. One is, it was a rigorous 3-day workshop, but it was Geneva, right? But Switzerland. So either way, it was fun. And maybe not like a volcano is exciting, but it was like beautiful. And but I learned a lot. And just to see that, we always think that we are doing the best here in our country here, but then if you think of Hong Kong and Hamburg, they were the top ones when it came to the list of how resilient and prepared a city is. So I would say that was one. I mean, whenever I think of research or any project, that one at Geneva was the best, I think. Thank you.
Bill, if you'd like to answer.
Sure. So I think the most unique project I ever was involved in was the World Trade Center collapse in 9/11. I was part of a FEMA mitigation assessment team that was put together in association or collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers. Our intended effort was to look at how and why the buildings collapsed. Now we know airplanes ran into them, so the end result was probably not too surprising, except that those towers, even when they were designed in the 1960s, had as part of their design the ability to withstand an attack from not an attack, but a hit from an airplane, because the designers thought, well, what happens if a plane gets lost in the fog or whatever in New York City? Remember, it's the 1960s, so we didn't have all the technology that we have today. And I guess, presumably they were thinking if a plane got lost trying to land at LaGuardia, they very well could end up downtown and striking a tower. So this team of people involved, 12 to 15 experts around the country. Most of them were structural engineers, but there were a couple of people that had focused on the business of fire as a hazard. And so it was pretty interesting trying to, we visited the site, and I don't remember how long we had boots on the ground, but it was maybe close to a week. It's the first time I'd ever entered a fire destroyed building. It was a building behind one of the towers that had been basically hit by fire, that was burned out. I'd never been in a burned out building. And so as a structural engineer that does disasters and then, climbs all over stuff that has fallen down, it was pretty unique for me. I guess I was struck mostly on a human level. I mean, we were on the pile of debris a couple of times when bodies were still being pulled out. You know, that tends to make your heart stop and you know, think about, you know, what the heck happened here. And I was struck by how generous New Yorkers were. All around the site, there were all kinds of businesses, you know, restaurants and whatever. And they stepped up to the plate to offer free food, free water, free everything for everybody who was working on the World Trade Center stuff. And it was an outpouring of generosity that I didn't really expect. So it hit me on a technical level because it was extremely interesting. That also hit me on a personal level.
Awesome, thank you. And
Sure.
Jen?
Mine's somewhat related to disasters as well. Definitely not planned, not expected. And Lynn Mayo was actually managing the first project that I started working on. So this was in 2005 after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and she was managing work we were doing to collect high water marks so that we could update the flood maps after those events. And it was a 2-week assignment. And I was in the middle of a normal civil engineering water resources job. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go for 2 weeks. That sounds interesting. And it turned into a little longer than 2 weeks. And while I was there, I learned about the Army Corps of Engineers effort to do the blue roofs in the city of New Orleans. And I contacted that project manager, who I did not know from Adam, and said, hey, I want to help you with this. Can you use me? And they put me on that project, and I was on that project for 6 weeks. And while I was there, I learned about FEMA public assistance, which is evaluating damaged infrastructure after various disasters and helping get the grants and identify opportunities for mitigation, all of that. And so I called that PM and said, hey, I want to do that. And that led to a 1-year deployment in Biloxi, Mississippi, which turned into 12 years of chasing disasters. And so everything opened up lots of doors. I ended up doing a transfer to Australia at one point out of people I met in Mississippi working on a disaster. So my point in sharing that is you never know where one yes is going to lead you and how one project is going to connect you to the next opportunity. And I was someone who was plugging along in water resources engineering, but not super passionate about it. And I got into the disaster work and just loved it. And I found it so rewarding and meaningful, and you're seeing these cities get rebuilt. And so it shaped my whole career. This 2-week assignment that I put my hand up for shifted my whole trajectory.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for your answers. And thank you, Amanda, for asking the question to our panelists. Our next question will be asked by Anupama. Anupama is a rising freshman at Piedmont Hills High School in California, and she aspires to be a physician or a researcher. So, yep. When you're ready.
Hi all, thank you for coming. So today I would like to ask, what types of careers do you think will be available related to disaster planning or climate adaptation in 15 years?
And we could go in the same order unless one person is more eager than the other. Yeah, Dr. Chenoweth.
There we go. Took a second. With the climate changing, whether we want to or not, we're going to have to adapt. And the question's going to be how adroitly, you know, our government and other governments are going to meet the challenge. Whether they meet the challenge or not, you're still going to have to adapt. I'm hopeful that you know, we're going to have to re-engineer virtually every aspect of our lives: homes, businesses, agriculture, coastal land management. There'll be jobs I would think, and I think, Dr. Mitra and Bill and Jen can probably even answer these better than me, but that's my impression. I mean, engineers are going to be needed to come up with the ideas and craft these things that we're going to need to use and live and work on roads and communication networks that'll be resilient to the climate change that is already on us. It's like the house is already on fire, and we're going to have to hopefully be nimble enough and do this before it gets too much more drastic. It's bad enough, I think, right now as it is. And I'm going to let them answer that. Bill, just one quick thing. You mentioned about the aircraft disaster. I believe in 1945, a plane actually flew into the Empire State Building in April that year. I think it was a bomber, but I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to
it was, yeah. I remember that as part of the history of looking at the towers. Yes, it was.
Okay, so I go second, and what I think the first thing which came to my mind when the question was asked is, oh, insurance companies. So, maybe if someone's thinking of a career, why not go into finance and, do insurance, whatever research and some internship. The other thing, of course, is engineering. And I'm not going to speak on that because, we have civil and structural engineer right sitting in front of us. I'm thinking more on the lines even of climate justice and the law. So a lot of jobs are going to come up, as we have seen, all the equity and inclusion, all of that. So, climate justice and law firms are going to go up with jobs. A lot of green infrastructure, and which means solar energy, electric cars, and of course, community planning. Then I can think of computer science. Those are careers which would really have a lot of jobs. And now coming from the field where I am now is more on geospatial techniques. For example, GIS, which is geospatial information systems, the GPS and all, how to put in points, locations. Then drone and satellite technology, that's also going to just shoot up all kinds of jobs. So if you're thinking of a career which is not absolutely embedded in like math and probably biology or chemistry and engineering, this could be another way where you can think of geospatial techniques. And at the end, being in academia for so many years, I think communication and education, talking to people is a big thing for if you have to be prepared and resilient to any of these natural disasters. So I can see, when we're talking, Elisa and Lynn and we all were talking about STEAM. I think STEAM, so STEM is good, but STEAM, where we can involve community and to spread the word, that's absolutely should be, I think, my thoughts, my 2 cents, should be on the top 2. Okay, move on.
So for me, I'm a civil engineer by degree and nature and experience. And so I think about all the opportunities that civil engineering students are going to have in this climate changing world. I mean, civil engineers are involved in water. Civil engineers are involved in infrastructure, bridges, roads, tunnels, airports. Civil engineers are involved in buildings. And all these things are impacted by climate change and disasters. So, the level of disasters that are occurring now and have been occurring over the last decade or so, unless somehow we change the way the climate's working, are going to continue to get stronger, harder, more expensive, et cetera. So I think there's going to be ongoing and continuing work there. The one disaster that I don't know a lot about because I've not really been involved in fire, and the one that I think is probably the one that we know the least about how to mitigate is the fire hazard. The fire just burns everything down, but how do we mitigate, how do we protect our buildings, how do we protect our infrastructure and our people against this really awful hazard? Yeah, we can squirt water on it, but as you're seeing right now in California, there's not enough water to go around. And so I think the fire hazard is something that really needs a lot of technical work and support. And the second hardest hazard, I think, to really work on is water. If you're out west and you don't have any water, what the world do you do? I mean, we have to then figure out a way to create water. You're not going to drill in the desert and find very many aquifers to be able to get water from. So if you're in the midst of a drought and you live in a drought experienced area, I think that's a serious problem. So there's a lot that we need to work on, and I think there's just going to be endless opportunities there. For students who are looking for avenues, one of the things I've learned in 50 plus years of practice is follow the money. So look at where the money is being spent, look at who is doing research in certain areas, look at the opportunities that exist, and the most opportunities are going to be where the money is.
Really good information from the fellow panelists already, so I'll try not to repeat any of what they've shared. On the where's the water aspect of it, I was working on water supply planning in Australia 15 years ago. I mean, like that is a very real threat. Where are we going to get our water? And it's very expensive to desalinate it. And so, what are the other options? And once you tap your aquifer and there's nothing left, so that's a big thing. I also just think, look at all the events and all the disasters that have happened over the last 20 years, and you can see how we've changed what needs to be included in planning. Like after 9/11 happened, that Bill worked on, and after mass shootings and school shootings, and after COVID, like how are we incorporating all of these different types of threats? Because it's not just flood, hurricane, fire, all of these that we're talking about. It's every other kind of threat that cities and counties want to plan and prepare for. And so I think, just pay attention to what's going on, and you can easily see where we're going to need to protect ourselves going forward. And you've already heard about strengthening buildings, but resiliency is such a buzzword. I mean, it's been a buzzword for the last 5+ years. And, trying to build stronger, more resilient communities, including infrastructure, is part of where that planning comes in to try and prepare for the next level. And so there's going to be niche fields like dealing with temperature control for materials that go into your building. There's going to be, laws on climate impacts and how that, needs to be controlled. We already talked about insurance, really trying to help a community visualize the impact. And I saw Elisa posted something about virtual reality, and that is a part of what we do in our business, even with general construction projects, to help people understand. And that could have easy application to disaster planning and climate adaptation. That's it for me.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Anupama, for asking this question to our panelists. So moving on to our next question. Our next question is going to be asked by Tabitha, our peer mentor, one of our peer mentors. Tabitha is a rising junior at Lehigh University, majoring in environmental science with career interest in both environmental science and writing.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you all for being here. So my question is for everybody. What is your top career advice for somebody who's in college or in high school?
We can switch it up again if you would like, or we can start with, let's start with Dr. Chandana this time.
Okay, so I think my first thought would be that, which you already are, I'm seeing Tabitha, is get your degree, because if you get a college degree without education in your career, you can rise only up to this much. So if you really have to go up the ladder, get your degree from the college. That's most important. And then, of course, be dedicated and diligent and all of that, which is more on character building, which we do it through life. The other main, one thing which I'm hearing now is, and hearing what major you're doing in environmental sciences, one thing which came to my mind is for anyone who's getting into college or even in high school, start looking into courses or, any of the classes which are going on, environmental science classes, sustainability classes. Like here in Auburn, we have a minor in sustainability. And I teach a number of courses there. So engineering students, civil engineers, structural engineers, which I first did not have any clue that why are they coming to my class? And then I realized that, of course, we have the science part of things, but we have a huge human component to everything, just like Jennifer was telling. So, you can do your science bit, but if you don't really connect it with the ground things happening, you really do not translate that knowledge. So majorly what I'm thinking here is, which I think all of us have done, the one on the panel and also the organizers, is just don't be siloed. Don't stay in your ivory tower. Come down and look at what's happening. Like Jennifer said, like see what the different events happening. And when you're choosing your courses, be very careful what you're choosing. Just don't stick, I'm passionate about biology, so I'm just doing that. No, look around. There are so many other things to do. And like I said, it could be a climate change, few courses on that, something on disaster. There are numerous departments. And also like communication from the education department, say, how do you communicate your science? And like I said, sustainability, environmental science minors. So that I think that is something which would be one major advice, is stick to STEM, but also look at the human factor and try to see how you can pan out what kind of courses you can take. Okay, that's from me, Jerry.
Thank you. Bill, would you like to go?
Sure. So there are a couple of thoughts here. It's not really top career advice, but there are several pieces, I think, to this. I mean, one was just mentioned. If you're in college, if you're in high school, go to college, get a degree. If you're in college, finish, get a degree. There are some fields these days where an advanced degree is probably important. It would give you a step ahead of some other candidates potentially, but that's pretty degree dependent, field dependent. I don't think everybody needs a master's degree, but it is certainly something to consider. So that's one thing. Just get yourself in the job market, and the way to get in the job market is to have a degree. The second thing I would say is something that Jennifer mentioned, and that is, I think your answer to every opportunity should be yes. Only because you just don't know where it's going to lead you. And you may not find that you like what you said yes to. And if you find that you don't like it, then that's fine. Then you don't want to do that. You don't want to pursue that. But, if you start working when you're 21, 22, 23, 24 years old, you have 50 plus years to work. So that's a hell of a long time. And you got lots of chances to, modify that career along the way. So I would just say yes to everything that seems reasonable. And the third is whatever it is you become passionate about, whatever it is you become really interested in, become an expert in it. So, I mean, my professional engineering license has saved my bacon many times. I could go get a job in anywhere in the United States because I have a professional engineering license. So that's one of those ways that you don't want to do anything that limits your capacity and ability to move around in the workplace, I don't think. So whatever that expertise is, I would pursue, that expert level every opportunity you get.
Thank you. Jen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I so agree with what's been shared so far and what Bill was just saying. I was someone who wasn't sure that I really wanted to do engineering. And so I was in college even trying different majors and I never found one that I liked more. And so I finished my degree because you got to finish. And what I have loved about it is that I have not felt stuck at all. I have done very different things in my career, and they have been very unconnected and unrelated to each other. And so a STEM degree will open doors. So don't feel like you're getting stuck in something. Just and I would say follow your interests, like Bill was saying, keep trying new things so you find something you love. I had someone tell me early at a job that I needed to specialize, but I hadn't found something that I really liked. So I was like, not yet, because I don't really like that stuff that I'm doing. And I'm so glad that I kept saying yes and trying different things, because now I love what I'm doing. And so I would also say, do not be afraid to try new things. You may feel like you don't know what you're doing, you're in over your head, you know, someone else is better at it than you. You're smart, you can figure it out. And like a lot of other people don't know what they're doing either. So fake it till you make it. You'll get there, you'll learn. And I think being willing to accept a new challenge is what has kept my job exciting for me. I don't want to do something I already know how to do. Once I know how to do it, I want a new role. And so just be willing to put yourself out there and know that learning on the job is and learning in school, like learning how to learn, is what you should focus on, because it's very little of the actual equations and, you know, concepts that I learned in school that I'm applying on a daily basis. But what I do all the time is learn new things and communicate them with other people. And, you know, that goes back to the human side of it and the emotional side of it. Emotional intelligence will go a long way in a STEM field. There's people that will be very nose in the books, nose in your computer. The people who progress in their career are those that really can connect with people and communicate with people in an effective way. So use your presentations that you're doing in high school and college to practice communication. You're going to be making PowerPoints for the rest of your life. Maybe there'll be some other new tool coming along, but know your audience, make sure you're talking to the right level that you're presenting to. And one last piece of advice that I would give you is to listen and observe before taking an action. It's easy to go in and say, oh, I have this great idea and I want to implement it. But you really build a lot of respect and rapport when you first really understand where other people are at and why they're there and how they've gotten there. And so whenever you're working with someone, whether you like them or even if you don't, like, ask yourself what you can learn from them. What can I learn from this person? How do I want to be like them or not be like them? And even if you don't like them, there's probably certain things they're really good at. And so really always be saying, what can I learn from this person? And how can this person help me be a better leader, a better engineer, a better scientist, whatever you're pursuing.
Thank you. And Dr. Chenoweth?
Jen makes some very good points there about listening to people. You want to, when you get into a work situation, you have to understand what your role is, what you're responsible for, and how you can deliver the best results. And that networking with somebody, if you say work with the government like my wife does, she has to figure out in her new position what the issues are, who can help me do it, who's got the money to help me do it. And then that's where you go schmooze. And you get to learn and you get to know people to help sort of grease the skids, as they say, to try and get the outcome that organizationally you need and that you need for your people. But you've got to keep the bigger mission picture wherever you're at in mind, because within every project you may be working on, it's part of something bigger, more likely than not, and there may be other equities at play that you may be aware of or you may not be. And the more you can be aware of the bigger picture of who ultimately is controlling whatever the income stream or the resource is, then you can approach it better. Another thing, as Bill mentioned, you got 50 years, so take care of yourself. Health is wealth. And as you get older, if you've had good habits or just good fortune, because not all of us, some of us, inherit conditions we can't control, or if we do have good health, you want to keep that because there's nothing more boring than being sick and worrying about getting back to work and doing what you want to do. So you want to develop those good habits while you're young, if possible. It doesn't mean you can't indulge and do things on occasion, but you should try to practice to do that, because having your health, after a certain point, you're making money, but it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire if you're just crippled, literally physically, because you didn't take care of yourself. Accidents will happen, but you can take care of yourself that way. So now's a good time to think about that, and everything in moderation.
Thank you. Our last student question for everyone, it will be asked by Emily, and Emily is a rising sophomore chemical engineering major at Lafayette College. So Emily, when you're ready.
I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming to spend the time to talk about your careers. My question is, what is the greatest challenge that you've faced in your career?
And for that question, we're going to make that a lightning round question. So keep your answer down to a minute. I know that's going to be, that's difficult, but yes. And let's start with Jen this time.
So the things that have been most challenging about my career are also the things that I've loved the most. So there's two things. One is that I have rarely been qualified to take any role I've ever taken. So just learning and quickly trying to get up to speed on something. I moved to Australia, I had to learn different software. I moved into a business development role, having never done business development. I moved into operations without that background, but that's been really fun. And the second piece of that is, because I was chasing disasters for 12 years, I had life on the road, and it was far away from friends and family. And it was super fun. It was exciting. I got to live and visit a ton of amazing, interesting places and meet a lot of people, but it came at a cost. And so eventually I decided to have a more local job.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Chenoweth.
Sorry, I'm a little off on that. This greatest challenge for me, probably because I work independently, is I have to sometimes go out and find the people who can help me with some of the tasks I've got with the projects I do. Sometimes I'll just need to go out and find somebody with a statistician maybe who's got more knowledge than I have on some aspect of a project I have to do. And you just can't go to somebody and say, hey, I'm doing this right now, can you drop everything and help me do it? You've got to put a little thought to it. And so for me, because I'm not attached to any institution, I don't always have that just right at hand the way some do. So I have to think about that a little bit. And but I have more freedom of action than some people do. So I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't been very stressed out in terms of doing my climate research, but I'm just the exception that would prove the rule in that case. But I do have to, I don't always have the resources on my own to necessarily produce some of the figures and stuff that might be ideal for a book or an article, but I can usually have colleagues I can go to and they say, oh yeah, that's not a problem there. So I'm a little bit self-limited that way. So that's probably where I have, more, if you want to say stressors on me, is to make sure I can get something done and in that fashion.
Thank you. Dr. Chandana, please.
Okay, so for me, the main thing, I think one of the challenges for me was, or still is that generally I do things at the last moment. Like if I have a proposal to submit, it's like I'm working on it for a while, but then the main thing comes in the last 2 days. Like I'm crazy and like I'm stressed out. So I'm trying to change that habit, but even after working, as Bill said, so many years, but I couldn't change myself. And I think that's something, again, going back to what Mike was telling. So if you do have good habits, if you want to be good and successful, I think you have to develop those habits early in life. So anyway, for me, it was mostly, that's the first thought coming to my mind is, or be organized. Don't always leave things for the last moment, because you never know what happens. If you can click that button to submit the proposal, it may not work. And then you're absolutely stressed out. So, and just keep up with what's happening new. And so I'm kind of referring to this question which Rivan Patel in the chat, is how would you recommend that we get started in a new field? That was a challenge for me too, because I'm a geographer, a climatologist by training, but I'm doing all sorts of STEM things, learning new tools, models, which I've never done ever before. So I think keeping up with what's happening new, trying to take that as a challenge and learning them before talking to anyone about it. Just doing background research is very important, even if you want to go into a new field or take another branch out into another section of the same field probably. So anyway, so for me, challenges, more doing things organized and before the deadline, like days before the deadline. Everyone should work on that. I'll try again.
Thank you. And Bill?
Yeah, for me, the greatest challenge during my career was when I was about in my middle 40s or so. I had a family crisis. My wife got cancer. I was working for myself. I had my own home building company, and I basically had to stop work so I could take care of my family. So, and that's pretty hard to do. So, where the hell do you make money? Where's the income coming in? How do you really take care of yourself? So, we got through that crisis, but the way I got through it and managed to move on with my career was I had a professional engineering degree, a license, so I could go market myself to others that were looking for professional engineers. And so that's why I offered earlier, get yourself equipped for a lifetime of work so that you have the flexibility to do and go anywhere you need to go to handle your situation. And it was right after that I landed a job with an engineering firm in Washington that looked for somebody who wanted to work for FEMA in the disaster business. And that's how I got started. And I landed the job from an ad in the newspaper, which is the most uncommon way to land a job ever. So, and it was mostly because I was local and had a PE license. So that was my greatest challenge.
Awesome. Thank you all. And also thank you, Emily and Tabitha, for asking questions to our panelists. So it is almost 1:50, but I did see that we had some questions in the chat. So to our panelists first, are you all available to stay until 1, like top of the hour 1?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool. So, so I see some of the panelists have been responding in the chat, but or I guess I don't know which question to start at. We could start at Miriam's question of do any of your professions focus on climate change policies, such as researching the effectiveness of carbon taxes or cap and trade policies? And then if so, how do you weigh the costs and benefits of each policy?
So I have answered Mariam, but just telling her that I don't do policy or really crunch the numbers on that. But there are, on top of my head, I can't remember, but they are really good. There are organizations and NGOs who do these, do the weights on different policies and how and what, like mostly coming up from California because they are pretty good on carbon taxes and that, but because I'm in Alabama and you know that Alabama does nothing on those. So I really cannot speak from where I am. Yeah, so probably I'll look up some of the websites probably and send it off to Jerry and Lynn so they can share. But right now, or maybe I'll search when others are speaking. So let's see.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm not involved in any of that, no.
Cool. Thank you. And then I believe Jen answered Ravon's question, but does anyone else have any answers to how would you recommend that we get started in a new field?
Dive in. I mean, if you have a field of interest, there's something that you that you have that excites you or that you think looks interesting. I think the only way you'll figure out whether it's of real interest to you or not long term is to just dive in and try it. Again, most people have a pretty long work career, so if you don't like it, it's not that hard to switch. Now, hopefully we don't come through another pandemic or some, condition that makes it hard to switch jobs. I mean, that certainly could throw a monkey wrench into that. But presuming that we have, normal kinds of work decades, I just suggest that you jump into anything you think you find interesting and try it out. Because as Jennifer said, or somebody else said, something that looks maybe not all that interesting, all of a sudden you hit on something that like, oh man, I really like this. This is fun, or it gives me a chance to see the world, or, whatever the situation is. So I would say just jump in.
Awesome, thank you. And then I saw, Jen, if you could repeat your answer.
Yeah, sure. It was very in line with what Bill just said, which is just go do it. But there's lots of, you can talk to someone who is in that field and get their perspective. Networking is huge. I mean, it is a lot about who you know. And so like network right now with people you're in college with, those people are all going to keep growing into higher level positions as you proceed through your career. Network through organizations like F.SEI or other, whatever. I'm saying that because I'm a civil engineer, so sorry, you're getting that bend, but whatever professional organizations are in your field of interest, helping to talk to them. You can read books, whatever, everyone has a different preference in their learning style. My preference is hands-on doing it. And so I told you earlier, I just started something new by putting my hand up and then calling and, asking, can I be on this and can I be on that and can I be on that project? And so I just encourage you to not feel limited by the book, the classes you've taken or the degree you have. There's a lot of crossover and applicability into other subjects. So just go for it.
Thank you. And Dr. Chenoweth, did you have an answer as well?
Well, I mean, I can just basically repeat, so I won't belabor it too much. I mean, but you also have to know yourself. And some people, it's a little harder to get up and ask the question than others. And ultimately, you have to get over that fear, particularly if you find it yourself a little intimidating early on to do that. There's always going to be somebody who's sympathetic. So you can be at a conference someplace and feel like a wallflower, and there's all these experts there. But there'll be some experts there that they'll be happy to talk to you. Just that's a hard thing to do. Some of us are more introverted than others, and you have to have your self-awareness. Know yourself and conquer that fear. And that'll help a lot.
Awesome, thank you. Another question that was asked in the chat by Brian was, what are, for all the panelists, what are your thoughts on temperature spikes over on the West Coast, and do you think we can reverse such a thing?
It's unprecedented.
Yes.
We've seen nothing like it in the recorded record, certainly in written records, and there's nothing in the, paleo record from, natural archives that suggests something like that's happened anytime in the last few million years anyway. It's going to keep getting worse, even if we decarbonized everything this minute and simply stopped putting it in because it's built in to the physics. So if we stop now, it's still going to get bad for another 20 years or so before it might start to plateau. And the challenge there is, how do you scientifically explain that and then turn it into a conversation that a politician can explain to his constituents? Well, your house burned down, we have stopped it, it's costing money. That's the challenge we're going to have. The rest of your lives, you're going to be lucky if we can plateau carbon emissions and have them starting to drop. It's going to be 500 to 800 years before we might possibly have the question, well, maybe we should bring the levels of CO2 back down to 270 or just 300 good enough. You know, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to get hotter, even if we did everything right starting this minute for at least a little while.
Yeah, so I would echo what Mike was telling. And Rivan, I can see this geoengineering is, as you say, is one of the ways. But then geoengineering is great, but the problem with geoengineering is we don't know what the after effects is. So, you know, we come up with all sorts of inventions and all fantastic things, but we really don't know what the effect of that will be in the next 10, 20 years. So I would, as a professor, I would say, of course, we have to come up with new inventions and, carbon capture and all of that. But other thing is also make some life, the way you lead your life, those kind of changes too. So, flying, of course, recycle, reuse, it's a household thing, but, we have to look into small little things. So there are ways in which you can contribute too. And the big thing again is learn about climate change, talk about climate change, and go and tell whatever even today, go and talk to your grandmother, go and talk to whoever person you meet next, because that's important. If you don't educate, if you don't spread the word, nothing is going to happen. So, however, if you don't change your way of life and you go and buy 5 cars, if there's only 3 people in a household, that's not doing good to our society and to the environment. So being educated, college degree, spreading the word on climate change will not really directly help with that Northwestern extreme heat event, but you never know. I mean, because, maybe in 2 generations, we'll be in a better position to deal with these things. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Great. It's the top of the hour, and it looks like we lost Jerry again. She might pop up in a minute, but really want to thank you all. I mean, this was a fantastic discussion. Really enjoyed it. Thanks to all the students, had some really good questions also. It's really obviously a very important questions, very important field that you all are doing. We really appreciate both the work that you do to keep us all safe and for taking the time out and talking to our students. I really appreciate it. So everyone will give a silent round of applause. And again, we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.